mendapatkan orang dari Stanford University, Profesor Heather, walaupun dari University of Quensland itu ada di Australia, tapi beliau dari Kanada. Jadi gitu teman-teman, perkenalan singkat dari beliau. Kalau saya perlu memperkenalkan diri nggak?
Perlu.
Ya, mungkin buat teman-teman yang belum pernah ketemu, saya udah ketemu beberapa mahasiswa saya. Saya Fajar, pengajar juga di Paramadina, di lingkungan internasional. Alumni Paramadina juga, tahun 2012. Dan kemudian melanjutkan pendidikan di University of Queensland di Australia pada tahun 2018 sampai 2019. Jadi teman-teman, tanpa membuang waktu lagi, kita akan mulai public lecture-nya. Tolong didengarkan dengan baik, tolong dihormati pembicara, dan serapkan itu sebanyak-banyaknya. Profesor Heather.
Langsung aja. Udah langsung biar waktunya. Udah langsungnya.
Mungkin silakan Pak kalau ada kesempatan dari
Bapak. Welcome to Jakarta, to Paramadina University. Thank you for your presence here. This is just small university with 5,000 students, and we will maintain small because we have no big buildings. Then we have graduate and undergraduate studies. Ya. Tepuk tangan untuk Profesor.
Is it okay if I stand up?
Okay, please.
Or is it?
Oh, sorry. This is hybrid, no? Hybrid lecture. And then other people hearing you outside this building.
Oh,
Okay, more than 100 participants.
my apologies.
Enggak, langsung aja.
Got it.
Langsung yang ininya dia.
All right, thank you. The challenge of giving a talk like this is that I still feel like my own leadership journey is unfolding, and so is yours. Perhaps that's true for everybody in this room, but I'm thinking especially of those of you who are students, whether you're here in the room or here in the Zoom. I'm going to assume it's Zoom. That might be too many, so anyway, whether you're here with us or watching online. We're all in leadership journey. It's hard to say where it began, and it's thrilling to say that I do not know where it will take us next. If you're listening carefully, you can hear that I'm speaking in the first person plural, we, us. And that's because I'm confident that by virtue of what you have chosen to study, governance, public policy, social sciences, humanities, arts, you have already embarked on a future-proof leadership journey. We will come back to that. But first, I will tell you a little bit of my own story. I'm essentially using my own autobiography as a text to analyze. Those of you who might be familiar with the American theorist Brené Brown's understanding of leadership fundamentals will recognize perhaps the vulnerability at the heart of that, although it also comes from my background in cultural studies and literature, as your generous introduction suggested. Sadly, I am not an expert in politics or governance, as many of you are, so I shall defer to you in these matters. However, I am an optimist. So along the way, I will share some of my convictions about leadership and its development. So my story. I grew up in a smallish city in the north of Canada, in a family that was not very well off. My mother did not have the chance to study at university, and my father does not have an undergraduate degree. He took what was called an executive MBA program at night, based on his qualification as a chartered accountant, which in turn he gained through apprenticeship and by challenging the national exams. My mother took in bookkeeping work while she raised my sister and me. Perhaps because they did not have the same chances at a university education that my sister and I ultimately did, my parents valued education a lot. When I was about 5 or 6, my father would set me a problem for the day before he went to work. What's the longest word in the book you're reading, he might ask. Or how many quarters of a cup are in a cup? I would puzzle it out all day, and every night he would ask the same question when he got home. What did you learn today? From my father, I learned to take responsibility for my own learning, and that has been crucial to my own leadership journey. So I promised I would share convictions, and here is my first conviction. It is important to take responsibility for your own learning. The lessons from my mother were different. She got to be the fun parent. One of the things that she is fond of saying, and if you ever visit her, she will say this in the first 5 minutes. She likes to say, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. This too has proved prescient for my development as a leader. I could not possibly have imagined, far less planned, the places that my education would take me. From Canada to the United States, to Australia, here with you in beautiful, beautiful Indonesia, and many other points along the way. So the second lesson here might be, number 2, be open to the unexpected. Well, as you will have gleaned, I was always destined to go to university, but what would I study? I consulted a very early generation computer-based career counseling program, which diagnosed me as being perfectly suited for furniture repair. That was not a good day, and it was not a good night. But after I went back and, refined some of the answers and downplayed my capacity for repetitive activity, the truth emerged. I should be a teacher, and this resonated with me. It seemed right.
Like our president, furniture shop. Furniture shop. Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, our president.
There.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I am a professor of literature and cultural studies, and I love the world of ideas, the agony and the ecstasy of writing. But for me in my career, teaching has always been the most consistently enlivening aspect of my job. And it is also at the core of what I do in academic leadership. My understanding of what teaching entails at the university level is profoundly influenced by Bill Redding's important book called The University in Ruins, in which he argues that academic teachers have an obligation without end, an inalienable obligation that plays out initially in the classroom, but is never restricted to it. That obligation is first to students, but also to thought and ultimately to justice. If I had to say in a sentence what my mission is, at this point in my career, it is this: I build academic leaders. And I do this because I truly believe that this is how we build a brighter world inside and outside of universities. So here's my third takeaway. It is important to do what you love. I can tell that you're good listeners, and so you will suspect that I'm glossing over some of the difficulties in the material, some of the challenges. You are right. I will tell you that in leadership, there is sometimes loneliness. I first experienced this when I went to graduate school at Stanford. There was a direct flight from the city I was living in, which is called Edmonton, to San Francisco. And in 3 hours of that flight, I moved away from everybody that I knew. And when I got off the plane, I realized I do not know a soul here. If you come to UQ, you will not have that experience because you know Magellan, but this was a different moment. So I did not know a soul. And I'm not sure whether you know this, but Americans make tea in a very unsavory way. They take a tea bag, they put it in a mug of cold water, and then they put the whole thing in the microwave.
What?
5 years of this I was facing. So I was homesick and uncertain, and I did not know whether I could stick it out. I was quite sure the admissions department had made a mistake. Imposter syndrome big time. But they hadn't made a mistake, or at least no one has yet come to take that degree back. And so I learned the value of courage, which I define as knowing that something is difficult and doing it anyway. Leadership theorist Brené Brown has a slightly different definition. For Brown, courage is demonstrated when we show our vulnerability and take a risk, and here's the key, without knowing the outcome. She talks about the 4 pillars of courage as being, first, vulnerability, being authentic, open, and truly in it without ironic distance or having all the answers. Secondly, courage is a matter of having clarity of values, knowing what you stand for and why. Thirdly, courage is demonstrated through trust, which has at least 2 aspects, both being trustworthy and demonstrating trust in others, being willing, in fact, to be the first person to demonstrate trust. And fourthly, what she calls rising with the necessary skills, taking yourself seriously enough to build the skills that you need to develop yourself and to develop others. So I will say, obviously, Brené Brown would agree with me on the 4th conviction that leadership takes courage. But her formulation is trickier than it sounds. Or rather, I believe that the 2nd and 3rd elements of the 4 that I named are relatively straightforward. So if you remember, vulnerability, which I think is tricky, clarity of values, pretty straightforward for us, trust, fairly straightforward for us, and then the skills, again, trickier. Why do I think this? We in the Academy treasure integrity. We are in the Academy tend to be values led. We treasure integrity, fairness, the possibility of transformation through hard work, excellence, and if you'll allow me to sneak this one in, it's not universally held, but I really value creativity. In part because we are led by our values, we find it generally easy to build strong relationships. So the trust piece. Not always true for everyone, of course, but of the 4 tenets that Brown lays out, these 2 in the middle are the most straightforward. The others, the 1st and the 4th, are a little more difficult. Being authentic, open, and in it without knowing all the answers. And the last one, finding the resilience to bounce back from failures. To be vulnerable and not know the answers is, simply put, excruciating for those of us who prize knowledge. We achieve success as academics by being the exact opposite, by being the one who knows all the answers, the person with her wrist stapled to her forehead, ready to answer the question before the teacher even gets to call on you, getting the top marks, getting called on first in class. Admitting that we don't know the answers only becomes more difficult as we move along from prestigious high school to highly ranked university to coveted postgraduate program. And because we get rewarded for getting high marks, very few of us have any experience of failing. When I was the dean of the graduate school at the University of Alberta in Canada, I tried to implement an entrepreneurship program for PhD students across the university. And if you know anything about entrepreneurship, you know that the most important thing to do is to fail fast. What I discovered is that PhD students used to getting the high mark, PhD students who got where they are precisely by always getting the high mark, had no experience of failing ever. So here we are. Being seen not to know is academically shameful, and we don't know how to fail. This makes us extremely risk avoidant. And this is ironic in an organization that enjoys an unusually high degree of professional autonomy. You are the experts in governance, so I defer to your knowledge here, but I do know something about the imagination. And I will tell you that playing it safe all the time ultimately cramps the imagination, perhaps even the soul. So I wish to turn this formulation around, the fear we have of being without the answers, the fear we have of failing, and suggest to you that ignorance is the necessary precondition to learning, and that our institutions of higher learning will be the stronger when our leaders rumble with vulnerability, to use Brown's terms, and admit courageously that they do not have all the answers, or rather, that we do not have all the answers. For I was speaking of courage as an antidote to loneliness, and there is at least one more antidote to loneliness. And this is where I want to come back to all of you and the journey that you are already embarked upon. The other antidotes to loneliness are community and collaboration. And increasingly, these are the things that I rely on in my leadership today: community and collaboration. So my fifth conviction, it's important to build community by collaborating generously. This matters to all leaders, but particularly to those of us whose passions and responsibilities connect us to the public good. And here is where I really come back to you in triumph, you who study social sciences, humanities, and the arts, because this is squarely in your wheelhouse. In their 2011 book, Reframing Academic Leadership, Lee Bowman and Joan Gallus say that successful university leaders need to be able to move in 4 dimensions at the same time in order to be successful. First, we need to understand the university as an architect might, to understand the policy, rules and regulations, the structure, in order to understand how to get things done. In this sense, the university is like a machine. Secondly, we need to be able to understand the university the way a politician might, to see the interpersonal and interdepartmental power plays, the diverse worldviews and beliefs that sometimes collide with each other, the underlying issues, and navigate them all successfully. In this sense, the university is like a jungle. Thirdly, we need to understand the university the way a parent might, to remember that the people we work with require a sense of purpose, and that they come to work every day striving to do their best and looking to their teachers, their research partners, and their employer to have their well-being at heart. In this sense, the university is like a family. And fourthly, we need to understand the university the way that a storyteller might, to frame compelling chronicles in the symbolic realm that bring all of these elements, the structural, the political, the cultural, and the familial, together in a recognizable narrative that allows us all to play out our different roles with a sense of flair, perhaps even a sense of dramatic inevitability. In this sense, the university is like theater. I was fortunate enough to study this book with one of its authors a few years ago, and we had lots of discussion about how difficult it is to move among these different registers. For one thing, and this will resonate with everyone who works in a university context. For one thing, it is often quite a significant challenge just to understand what's going on, given that the environment is what we call VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. However, I would argue that those of us in the social sciences, the arts, and the humanities enjoy an advantage in VUCA contexts. The texts we study are themselves complex and ambiguous. The nature of human existence, causality in history, the prognosis for democracy, if not also volatile and uncertain, prone to rethinking. We are comfortable in this space in a way that some of our colleagues are not. Moreover, the very nature of thinking metaphorically is a key skill imparted by the humanities, arts, and social sciences. We are code switchers of the first order, polyglots and communicators. These, it turns out, are fundamental leadership skills. Every challenge the world faces now is a human challenge. The pandemic we just came through was in no narrow sense medical. Vaccines were important, but vaccination is what saved us. COVID-19 called on us to think carefully about questions of care, of sociality, of community, and responsibility. Again, these are in your expertise. And even if you consider the pandemic to be over, other urgent struggles are not. Personally, I'm mightily worried about the stranglehold of English language, media, and the prevalence of fake news. We need better storytellers, leaders who are connected to communities and to each other, narrators who can find perhaps a feminist through line in a world that would drown it out. Or what about this? As generative artificial intelligence like ChatGPT grows in intensity and invasiveness, we need the coders to be advised by people who can tell these coders how to train machines more ethically and responsibly. In short, this world needs humanities, arts, and social sciences with global experience and ethical conviction. Not everyone sees it that way. You do need to know that. Some of you may need to stand up to your parents or your peers to keep pursuing careers in the areas that are close to your heart. But look around you. There is one colloquial definition of leadership that holds the leader to be the person at the front of the room, the top of the pyramid, the head of the pack. But there are other definitions that talk about leadership as a more distributed form, a shared endeavor that draws on the deepest values that you hold and calls on you to act on them. Brene Brown says, and I'm quoting, "A leader is anyone who takes responsibility for finding the potential in people and processes and has the courage to develop that potential." That's the end of the quote. Similarly, the theory of adaptive leadership, promulgated by Ronald Heifetz and Marty Linsky, is premised precisely on the possibility of widespread change within and across complex organizations. Those of you who have some background in science will have caught, perhaps, in the name adaptive leadership, the resonance of a genetic metaphor. The theory of adaptive leadership takes its cue from adaptive organisms, those which discard characteristics that are not useful for survival, while developing new ones better suited to a changing environment. Adaptive leadership focuses on the need for change within organizations and encourages actions that disrupt the status quo in order to incite forward momentum. In the School of Adaptive Leadership, which Bowman and Gallows exemplify, leadership is not just something generated from the person in charge. Instead, leadership is distributed broadly. But I do not need to look to books for such a definition, because this is an approach to leadership that my generation is learning from your generation, from people like Greta Thunberg or Anis Deo or Fariza Farham. What characterizes these young activists is that they know their convictions and they enact them. They are able to negotiate the ethics of leadership by keeping their broader purpose alive. They integrate ambition with aspiration. They are vulnerable and courageous because they speak from their conviction. So here's my sixth and final exhortation. Lead from where you are. Pledge right now to support one another, working from your values by taking responsibility for your learning and being open to the unexpected. Commit to honestly inhabiting your vulnerability and meeting your ignorance with respectful curiosity instead of shame. And none of you will ever have to do this alone. And that is the kind of leadership that will change the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. How should I call you?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much for the lecture. So the lecture was reflecting the journey that she's been through from the childhood until where she is right now. And I'm hoping you get the message and everything. And do you have any questions? I think the best way, yes, the lady in the back, please. Please introduce yourself, your name, and from which major are you? And then the questions. Louder, please.
My name is John Alvarado Sanchez. I am from National. First of all, I'd like to thank you for coming. After learning more about the background and your story, a thought came to my head that while every person or every person who's on the journey of being great comes from different backgrounds, perhaps as a woman from a woman's perspective, there's still a sense of an underlying expectation of failure compared to others. And what would you say would be the focus on as the driving force in order to achieve? Thank you.
Would you like to get the questions first, or do you want to directly answer it first?
Whatever you think is
Okay,
better.
I think we'll just get 3 questions first, and then Professor Heather will respond to that, and then after that we continue with another questions. Who else did it? Wait, after this, we go to this side first. Be fair, okay? Yes, Asha, please.
Hello, my name is
Louder, please.
My name is Angshad and I'm studying international relations. My question is about the vulnerability. Recently I was appointed as delegation from my student association, and since the beginning I've been telling my coworkers that I like to be transparent, I like to give transparency, and I like to be vulnerable about the things that I don't know. But however, I believe that being vulnerable all the time will make people's perception of you as a leader will wear out over time. So my question is, how to balance between vulnerability and the knowing the answer?
Very good questions. Thank you. The last one was, who else? Please raise your hand. Yes.
Good morning, Professor Heather. My name is.
It's afternoon already.
Afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Ricardo Gautam and I'm studying international relations. And I have a question, and it's about the background. Professor Heather, you mentioned that at the beginning of your leadership career, that things did not go well for you. Well, but from my point of view, that you had supportive parents that helped you. Now, my question is, would you say the same that you will do with the same determination in your life if your parents did not support you just as much? Thank you.
Thank you for the first 3 questions, and I think you can respond.
Yes, those are three very, very interesting questions. And what I might do is address the second one first, because I think the first and third are connected. Yeah. So I think, look, I think transparency and vulnerability are connected, as you say. And how would I put this? You have to, I think if you are vulnerable and transparent about the things that you don't know, I think that's good. I also think that if you're in a position of leadership, you also have to keep learning things. So if you're transparent and what you have to show people is that you can never be fussed to learn more than you do today, then you're showing them not a very good thing. And they're quite right to lose. I mean, I'm not saying this is true for you. I'm sure you're learning a lot, but it's that, right? You have to keep learning things yourself, because none of us knows everything, but we keep trying, we keep learning, we keep growing. And that's actually what you want to be showing to people as you go through. I think that's my goal in any event. On the question of supportive parents and the expectations of women's failure, I kind of link those together because they go to this question of how you interact with the family and the broader society, right? So I think that, personally, it's quite true. I love my parents. They're terrific, and they've been very, very supportive of me in my life. I also could name any number of people who also had supportive parents and maybe didn't have similar determination to get through. So it's kind of an unanswerable question, how you nature and nurture, right? I think most of the research now suggests it's both how you're born, and it's both the way that you're born, your nature, and how you're brought up, the nurture part of it. It determines how you become, how you present as an adult in life. And for women, I think this is an interesting question around whether we're expected to fail or not. One of the ways, because I mentioned having imposter syndrome, and I think it is a trick that we play on ourselves. And if I'm asked the question, how do you get over it? At a certain point in my career and life, I just thought, oh, actually, you know what? That I'm letting down somebody else, that's their problem, not my problem. Because I actually know what I'm doing and I know what I'm trying to achieve. I care what people think, of course I do. But their expectations are different. Their expectations are not my business. Because it goes to what I was saying about community and collaboration. The people that I collaborate with, the people that I trust, and the people who trust me are the ones that I'm focused on, and the people that I'm working for, which in my case is almost always sort of first the students, then the world of knowledge. That thing I said about teaching, right? Students, the world of knowledge, the people that I work with, building a better world. That's what it is about for me. It's what it comes from inside. And that's the yardstick I measure. That I'm letting down somebody who thought I should be a different person. I can't. I'm sorry that you thought I should be a different person.
Thank you. I hope this answers your questions. Well, you have any other questions, please? Yes. Yes, you, sir.
Thank you. I need to set up.
Oke, bahasa Indonesia.
Kita tahu di setiap parlemen itu pasti ada minimum keterwakilan perempuan.
Saya harus koreksi dulu, tidak selalu parlemen, tapi oke.
Seperti di Indonesia kan ada minimum keterwakilan 30% berdasarkan keputusan tahun 2017. Nah, maksud saya, apakah peran perempuan untuk masuk ke dunia pemerintahan itu dapat menambah keseimbangan dalam pembentukan kebijakan? Terima kasih.
Oke, can I modify your questions as well? Boleh nggak saya modifikasi sedikit? So basically, what's your name again?
Yes.
Namanya siapa?
Yes.
Yes. So, Mr. Yas, so he is asking, in the several parliaments, there are requirement that the member of the parliament elected has to be women. For example, in Indonesia, it's 20%, isn't it? 30% in Indonesia. How do you see whether or not this certain policy going to empower women needs and women aspirations in regard to their public policy? Well, I had a lot of debate about this during my study, but yeah, I would like to hear your thoughts, of course. Any other questions, Marcy? Wait, very much only. That's the first question. We take another three. The next one, Wait, Mbak, silakan Mbak.
So, good afternoon. My name is Casey Indeli. I'm from International Relations degree. So, the question that I would like to ask is that first, I would like to say that I can relate to one of the conditions mentioned earlier. So, and I've been facing that imposter syndrome too, and facing not knowing the answers to a lot of things, especially when I was in the class, especially during presentation as well. And I always have to how do you overcome that, and especially when you're also working in a male-dominated field, how do you what challenges you face, and how did you overcome them? Thank you.
Thank you. Dulu Mas, can
What you were talking about in regards to leadership.
you explain yourself first?
My apologies. My name is Fatih Hamadi, third year, I student. Okay, in regards to leadership, in terms of leadership, sometimes you do have to be stern in regards to handling issues. Sometimes you have to be soft. The thing that my question is in regards of how you make those tough decisions that might make you unliked by other people. As you stated previously in regards to other people's expectations, I think there's an answer to that, but I'd like to get into more details on how you essentially make those decisions and ensure that, you know, or you make even though the decisions that you do make you be disliked by other people, you keep on making those decisions even when it's wrong and or right. And also how you tackle when you are. I think a part of learning something, a part of doing something that includes leadership is failing, as probably have been discussed before. How do you tackle that going forward in you making those unlikable decisions when you are right and when you are wrong, essentially?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes, the three first, and then afterward we continue.
Yep. I forget your name. Yeah, Maisie. I want to go to your question first. And I think my answer to you around imposter syndrome and how you do things well as a woman in a male-dominated world is to say to you this: no one is good at everything. And what follows from that is you are good at things that other people are not good at. And so I'll tell you something I'm not good at: reading graphs. And I've been around people who they read in multiple dimensions at the same, in one instant. They can see, they get these things laid out, and they get the vertical axis, the horizontal axis in one. They understand the scale. They just get it. I know how to read a graph, but it takes me a long time. I look at it and I have to make conversational, I think. So the vertical axis is, and then the horizontal axis is, and the scale is, and what's actually being demonstrated, because what I'm good at is words. And another thing I'm good at is people. And a third thing I'm good at is politics. And so where I'm great is in meetings, where things are happening around the room, and I can say, right, this is actually a rehash of this other issue that I observed last week. What's really happening under the surface is such and such a thing. How this needs to be resolved is, right, or I sense how people are feeling, and I think that comes more easily to women because we're socialized to understand their feeling and respond to that than most men are. Generalizations, not true for everyone, and not really true for the other gender that are, but that's an example. And when you get into leadership, understanding what you're good at compensates for the things that you're not good at. Because those characteristics, like I was saying about the skills that I believe people in humanities and social sciences have, there's actually a very high degree of overlap between those skills and the skills that women in the cultures that I'm familiar with are acculturated to acquire. So that's what I would say. You will never be good at everything. And there will always be things you're not good at. So perfection, just give it up. But knowing who you are, knowing what you can be good at, and leaning into that, do that. And the rest, eventually you get to a place, and this is the great trick of it, eventually you get to a place where you can start working with people and choosing people who are good at the things you're not good at. So I always work with a data person. They supplement what I'm not good at. They're faster than I am. So that's my answer on that one. Do quotas work in governments? Yes, they're the only thing that work. And then is it,
Happy.
Fatty.
People call me Pete. Australian people call me Pete. Yes.
Yeah, Australian people call me head, so I hear your pain. Yeah, the question of when to be stern and when to be soft, it's interesting. I think that I'm a big believer that honesty is important and that being clear is a form of being kind, even when you have things to say that people don't want to hear, because I believe very strongly in learning. We're all here to learn, and no one's perfect. So and it depends what you're talking about. Like, this can either be an interpersonal situation or it can be a big decision for the organization. And they can both be very difficult. Interpersonally, I truly believe that everybody comes to work to do their best, and everybody wants to go home feeling good about the day. I also believe people make mistakes, and they make mistakes because they don't know how to do something. And if I know better, I should tell them, and the sooner the better. If they've made a mistake and I can see it, and it's my job actually to tell them that, even if it's an awkward, difficult, uncomfortable conversation. I don't love those conversations at all, but it's actually extremely important. And to move on from that, in this meeting, when you said would it have been better? What if you had? I've heard this feedback from other people and it's causing problems at work. That kind of stuff you have to. Being clear with people is kind of at the end of the year. You know, how do you feel about your year? I thought it was great. Okay, so I did not, and here's why, right? All that stuff. I'm a teacher first. You know, everybody in my class wants to learn. So that's my assumption. On the interpersonal, on the macro level, it's, you know, you have to be able to, I think you have to be able to explain why you are making the decisions that you are, and remember that you see things differently than other people. So there is a nice metaphor that I've heard before. The metaphor is this: everybody here has gone for a picnic on the grass or at the beach, and then there's ants or something that get in the picnic, and you think, oh, the ants are terrible. But then you have to imagine somebody is in a building and they're thinking, stop complaining about the ants, because I'm on the 10th floor of the building. You want to see the storm clouds that are coming in. Right? So it's that you have a different perspective and you see different things to be worried about.
Yeah.
Thank you. The next question, wait, it's going to be for me.
Ah,
I have a privilege to give a question. So, the duty of a leader is actually to make decisions. And then, in my personal opinion, making decisions means managing the risk, because you don't know whether your decision is going to get best result. One of my favorite lecturers at UQ, her name is Nicole George.
that's great.
She told us one of the greatest thing about women is actually they are more multitasking than men. In regard to this question earlier, what kind of perspective in terms of women, feminism, that you can be enlighten us? Why does making decisions in terms of women somehow better than us, the men? Not trying to compare, but actually to learn and enrich each other. That is my first question. My only one question. Sorry. Next question, please.
The old generation. The old before young generation, now old generation.
Okay.
Your story is very important and interesting. Your story from the village in Canada and your mother's not entering the university and your father only undergraduate, right? This is that are very much different from with Indonesia. like me, 60s, the old generation, 60s like me, and other generation, the first time entering the university, our father never, even they could not read or whatever. Yeah? So this is a vertical movement of our generation, actually quite fast in Indonesia. But I know I want to take your profile, your text to the macro level.
Yes.
You know, from only first generation entering university like me, and even this university only 27 years, yeah. And your father and mother entering university already? Not yet? Not yet, yeah. Only for yeah. So no mobility, vertical mobility in Indonesia is very fast. You know the current situation. We had the president woman Megawati. You have also in Australia Julia Gillard, yeah?
Yep.
But never maybe in Canada, right?
Kim Campbell.
Oh, pernah sekali ya?
Belum.
Never ya?
Belum.
Kan,
Oh,
yeah.
Kim Campbell.
Okay, Campbell. All right.
Already ya.
So
And
she
then not only that,
was a short time. She was the prime minister for less than 1 year.
Oh,
okay, yeah. But the whole leaders in my university here in Paramana, mostly women,
Yes.
except the president, the rector. And then the member, the speaker of parliament, woman in Indonesia now. Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Finance, wherever woman. What do you think about this situation as compared to Australia, Canada, about this situation, you know, your perspective in macro level, starting from your micro.
One more questions?
Thank you.
Silakan. I promise after this, join with you.
Ini anak-anak bahasa Inggrisnya bagus semua. Ini anak-anak bagus bahasa Inggris.
Is it from online?
Yeah.
Good, I was gonna ask
Thank
if
you,
anybody.
madam.
Yes.
Thank you, Professor Srigan. And this question comes from Devi Sylvia Lestari. Good afternoon, Professor. My name is Pipi, a student from Management and Faculty. I'm awardee of Tamu Fellowship Leadership H1. My question is, how do you think the leadership of women and how big the role of women today in the modern era? And in your view, do women currently have equality with men in terms of development in education and career? Because I realize at least of women of on the outside and entire world not lucky as a man who have a privilege to work and study and at the same time. Thank you. And then question number 2 from Reno Ranti. Hi, I'm Reno Ranti, Magister of Diplomacy. Can you tell us, as a woman, how can you handle gender bias in leadership? Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
So we make it all.
Yeah,
online.
extra.
Yeah, extra. Because online. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Please, Tanya.
So in there, these questions all do have something in common with each other. I mean, in a sense, your question is the easiest around decision making, because I don't know if it's the same in Indonesia as it is in Australia or in Canada or in the United States. But if you're driving with a man and he doesn't know where he's going, if you're driving in a car and you don't know where you're going, who do you want to be driving with, a man or a woman? Right, why? Because they'll ask somebody. So you're with a man.
That's true.
This is a stereotype. I know it's a stereotype a little bit, but you're with a man, right? You're like, maybe we should pull over and ask for directions. No, I got this. I got this.
Yes.
They don't got it. You're the woman, it's like, oh, I don't know where I am. Maybe we can ask. So it is about managing risk, right? And what the risk is you will never get where you're going. And so it is, I am making a little bit of a joke, but I actually do believe that women tend to be more consultative and in complex organizations. It's the role of it. Ultimately, it's my call. Ultimately, I have that responsibility. But when I make that call, I want to make sure that I've actually considered it from all angles. and that I've consulted as broadly as I can, and so that's why I was giving that slightly flippant example there. I'm gonna come back to your question last, because it's a very complicated one. I think how do you deal with gender bias in leadership, is very difficult to answer in a wholesale way. I'm not sure, where's the camera is, there's the camera, hi. I think I've not been looking at the camera the whole time. Thank you both for your questions. Look, I think the question about gender bias in leadership is an important one to be asking and to be on the lookout for. But that the answer is probably specific to the situation. I go back a little bit to the answer that I gave to your colleague when I said no one is good at everything, but everyone is good at something, and being able to lean into those skills and triumph in that arena means that you're likelier to be noticed in that event, even if you're discriminated against somewhere else. I also think that calling out poor behavior on other people's part is important, but I say that recognizing that it's not always a pragmatic and practical thing to do. And again, it's very, very context specific. Do women have equality in education and in career? It's a very, and this is what gets into the rector's very interesting question about thinking at scale and how quickly this has changed. The answer is that women do not have equality in education because in most environments and in most disciplines, they now outnumber men. It's especially pronounced in health, in applied science and health. And this is true. I don't know the Indonesian scenario, but I do know a little bit about, for example, India, Saudi Arabia, Canada. I'm not sure about the US, Australia. And in those environments, health, certainly education, but education has long been a feminized endeavor. But things that haven't been, doctors, MBAs, engineers, women are outnumbering men in these fields. And it's happened, and this is your point, it's happened very, very quickly. It's happened very, very quickly. So the number of, I just saw Canadian stats the other day. Women's participation in university is higher than it's ever been. And I believe overall 54% of university students are women.
Australia.
That's Canada. Australia would be similar. I haven't seen recent, but 54% in Canada from memory. You'd have to look this up, but that's kind of startling. And it's the same in master's level, same disproportion. And then it starts to vary, it starts to become by discipline in the PhD. So more, but still women are very well represented in areas that we used to think of as areas of underrepresentation for women, like engineering, health, applied science, other applied sciences, for example. That has happened in 12 years. So it is kind of astonishing. And I do believe, because I said I was an optimist, I do believe that means that they'll have, career equity. There is still a phenomenon that's, again, true in Australia, whereby professions that become dominated by women sometimes see wages suppressed. So that still does happen in some environments, but it's also the case that anybody with an undergraduate degree in aggregate earns more than anyone with a high school diploma. Again, in aggregate, you can always find exceptions to these things, of course. So at a macro level and over time, I think the career equity is on its way. And it's a big transformation, socially speaking. What that statistic hides, and this is where I kind of come to your question, because your question actually started not so much about gender, but about what we would maybe a little bit crudely call social class. And what those statistics that count women as a whole and men as a whole, or two genders, what those statistics hide is the complexity that is captured and then suppressed within each of those categories. And so increasingly, when I think about gender, I want to be thinking about gender from an intersectional perspective, so that you can think about race, you can think about class, you can think about whatever the vectors that determine inequality in a given environment might be. And they change from place to place. Indigeneity is a big one in Australia, and it's a big one in Canada, to the shame of both countries, I will just say. In some environments, religion, in some environments, caste, right? So you have to know what these terms are, and they change from place to place. But being able to think about intersectionality, gender, and is actually gives you a much more nuanced understanding of how the world is changing, and of how to think about gender and multiple genders. Obviously, two is probably not enough for the 21st century that we're in. How we think, I mean, I'm not a macro economist, we defer to a macroeconomist, but the fact that we, in Australia now we're at 40%, over 40% participation in higher education, and the government has said they want it higher. And I don't think we know how to imagine what 60% participation rate. Unbelievable, because Australia has had the same rapid rise. It's been since 1980. The Dawkins reforms in 1986, I think. So 30 years ago, it was, 18 or 19% participation rate in higher education. And that's been fast. So this is it. It's really quick. That was a very long answer.
Okay.
We have at least last two terms, so 6 questions really. And I'll start with you.
Thank you for giving the opportunity. My name is Nadia Hamida, and I am an international relations student. I'm going to talk about hegemonic masculinity institutions.
Okay.
Would that be right?
Yes.
In Indonesia, we have some, in global, right? Talking about defense or strategy, defense or security. It's always becoming so hard for women to get there. Because somehow, even though we have women peace and security institution right now from PBB, from
United Nations.
United Nations, but it's still hard for women to be put in their in that position. In terms of Indonesia, we're talking about how it is so hard for women to be part, even though we are already maybe it's in the point of
Prevention.
yeah, prevention, but it's also because of there are bias gender, because women are black market. So that's why we with women, or we collaborate with women because they are other, because in terms of Indonesia, we're also talking about a family as an institution, and in the family institution, there will always be like a mother, kind of the one that runs the family actually, even though the father says is the one that should have to be as responsibility to do it. But I'm gonna talk about how it is so hard also, because even though women are in the prevention, but we are not being put or participate in the point of leadership, because there are actually no one in Indonesia, no women in Indonesia that are input or departing on the leadership of the defense and security in Indonesia.
I have
What
to
do you
correct you
think?
on that. I have to correct you on that, but you can go on first.
Okay, but actually in the institution, like the PT, maybe there are no women in the leadership, right? Because we're talking about the statistics, because it is so hard, because mostly it's from the police. Yeah. We're talking about the police. There's still less women in Poland, it's only 6%. Now in Indonesia, no, it's only 6%. In Indonesia, women are in the police department. It's, what do you think about it?
I hope you get the questions, but first, there was leaders in terms of security for women. In Banten province once, the governor was women, the head of the police was women, and also the head of the military base was women.
Oh,
It was,
thank you.
it was, but yeah, I think you get the points from her, right? Thank you. The next questions, please. Anyone? Yes, before, please. Louder, please.
Well, first of all, my name is Vivo. I'm from International Relations major. If someone get appointed to be a leader in some organization, and the people that we lead don't like us, like they don't appreciate us and don't do what we say, and they just do what they want to do. From Professor Heather opinion, how do we face it if we got in that situation?
Thank you. Next questions. Yes, please. You again? Okay.
Yes, continuing from the first question, it's more
Oh,
of
you're
a,
not satisfied now, yes?
yeah, it's more of a genuine question. I want to ask, why do women think that they should be put in power? You know, no, it's not a biased thing. I mean, imagine this. Let's say that the Ukrainian and Russian war, where men are forced to fight and the women don't. I mean, it's like thinking that we value women in home more than they are sent to death. It's not that we don't want them to be in power, in charge of this military or security. We just want them to feel like they are way more needed to be saved than sent to death. You get my point, Professor Heather? So that's my question. Why do women think that they want to put in this position where it's more of a dangerous thing than it is safe? That's just my genuine question. Thank you.
Wait, 3. Please, because I have.
Is that 3?
Yes, 3.
Well, I don't know. I think everybody should wear yellow shirts. Just a thing I think. Good with that? Or maybe just all men should wear yellow shirts. Because I think it's good. I can see this yellow shirt, good on you. I can see lots of yellow in this shirt, looks good on you. I'm just gonna say.
We are in the same political coalition right now.
Exactly.
No,
But also,
kidding.
it's, and I think if you wear this, it looks good. I
Thank
think it's
you,
gonna be good for the birth rate.
thank you.
You happy with that?
Okay.
Not thrilled. Because maybe you actually don't want just to be clumped with your gender. And responsible, made responsible for saving the birth rate of the nation. I'm just gonna suggest, go out on a limb, suggest that. Remind me the population of England,
275 billion.
275 million. Roughly half of those being women, a little more, right?
More.
51%.
More than.
Right.
So half of that would be, again, I've already said not gonna math in my head. So.
So how will
100 and,
160?
Yeah.
140, 150.
really? 6% of the police? It does feel like we wouldn't need to have a policy about all women. Would be my answer to your question, if you see what I'm saying.
But one thing, maybe I can add a little
Yeah.
bit from the questions, just a big picture. And one thing is really interesting, mostly of the, although they've been trained in the same way as the men, the police woman, for example, mostly they put on the PR, public relations position.
Yeah, or traffic.
Yeah.
Right.
Something like that, more.
Or something about like the way how, actually, it's also because of, we call it institution of hegemonic masculinity, where it starts from men and becoming, and somehow men becoming the norm, right? Because men becoming the norm, even though there are women, they've been feeling this women becoming only decoration, something, or either the reason why there are women there is also because they have this familiar way of thinking as such as men, because it's always becoming the norm. And when it's becoming the norm, everyone kind of happens.
So my answer to you is actually in the form of a book recommendation, which is by our colleague named Sarah Percy, Percy. You'd know her. And she just wrote a book about women in the Australian military. It's similar issues, but actually one of the things that she argues in that book is that there are always more than you think there are. And it's interesting because I actually just heard it play out. So you said there was no one, you were like, actually, right? So I think you would actually find that to be quite a good book to read. So that's my answer. And then FIFO, where's FIFO? What to do? Well, so look, if you're unpopular and unsupported as a leader, what should you do? The first thing is you should know why. And that's about being in consultation with people and understanding what it is that you're doing that makes you so unpopular, and having a sense of how you might, make different decisions or new coalitions. Again, it is hard to give answers outside of a specific context. But if you find yourself in a position where you're unsupported and unpopular, and it's because you're making decisions that need to be made. I mean, there are casualties of history, people who are great leaders and made good decisions, but were not supported. But I think there's probably more people who needed to do a bit more work on the ground to make allies, make compromises, and ensure that they had, maybe better refined ideas or something. I think that would be my answer.
Thank you. Now last chance. Party first. The other two. Any other questions, guys? Last chance. I'm not gonna add them. Yes, please. And then you'll get. Party, please.
Okay, since the conversation about equality has been provoked, I'll just put a disclaimer. Before uni, 2016, Donald Trump came up and started his whole campaign, I was super left. I'll say that on the political spectrum. I was purely against Donald Trump and his statements. Still am now, but as time goes on to go into uni and all that, I think the whole commotion in regards to equality has been overblown significantly. I'd essentially just like your response to a few things. Like in regards to the pay gap, I think one of the most controversial issue has been the women's US football team. They have not been receiving as much watch time as the men's football team. However, they wanted equal pay, but that does not correlate to the amount of sponsored money that has came into their league. I'd like to your response to that, and also in regards to the whole equality thing, I think a different culture. I think there has been things that has been said because, well, it's called for. For example, maybe in regards to the pay gap, this is the common statements in the internet is that, okay, women take maternity leaves and stuff like that. I'd like for you to disprove that in a way, and that equates to lower payment. And I don't personally agree with that, but that's the internet. But in Indonesia, especially in regards to women's equality, we have been in parking in malls. We have specifically whole floors for women's parking. We have a whole train, not a whole train, a carriage for women only. We also have a whole bus for rapid transit for women, and that is a called for because why there has been cases of sexual assault. So that is called for. I think in regards to that, it's different in every culture, and I think that it's essentially called for per se. What do you think of that?
The next two questions, make it short, please. Yes. You have a separate question. Can you just pick in one, please? Or combining into one question, please. Okay.
I'm not a student from this university. I'm actually a journalist. I have several questions back to your speech earlier, and you promote the education institution, which promoting things to learn, to make tailored, and to be, ask without shame. First question, how is the status quo right now in the education institution in general? Does it not promoting the values that you promote earlier? And second of all, why is it important to have to create that kind of education institution? And thirdly, by creating the safe space to learn in the education institution, how it will affect the students in the long term?
I might have missed the middle part of that. You're asking about a safe space for learning and why is that important? What is the state of play?
What is important and what is the status quo right now? And also, how it will affect the student in the long term?
Yeah, thanks.
That question, please.
Okay, maybe first introduction. Good afternoon, my name is Abdullah. I'm from the International Relations major. My question is more like a learning experience, and maybe because I've been hearing a lot of these positive points and early points on how to be a great leader, etc. But what I'm wondering is maybe any suggestions on how to grow leadership from group members, because from group members. So it's more like spreading this leadership points, leadership developments to other members, because for this time I've been like pointed out be a group leader from the group project all the time. So what I want is to maybe learning experience from professor on how do you spread that leadership to other people, grow leadership on other members or other members.
Thank you.
So that's a really interesting, how you grow leadership from group members is a really interesting one, because it requires taking a chance and it requires extending trust and it requires being willing to fail. Because what we know about being in a group is that we don't control everything that happens in a group. And so you really do, I think, genuinely have to give people an opportunity to show what they can do. And sometimes they will let you down, and they will let the group down, and they will let the experiment, the project, the opportunity down. That's on them. But taking that, that is allowing them to demonstrate leadership and not saving them and not protecting them from that. I think that's my answer to that. And I think that is also what we sometimes call character building for you too, to be able to step back and just let somebody else have that chance. It's hard. It's really difficult to do. I might, before I come back to the questions about a safe space, I might take on, I'm sorry, I wrote down here, the internet.
Yes.
Gonna be
Start
active
with me.
to the apologist for the internet, or to respond to the internet, so take up the internet. Women's American football, so look, I have a really simple answer to that. I hate gridiron, so I would have solved that problem by reducing men's playtime. But it's a wicked problem, and it comes up because it's an easy one to band-aid, but
Sure.
how did the men's attract so much advertising revenue and crowds? I mean, US college, as they say, university, we would say. University football in the United States, a typical Friday night game, not a playoff game, nothing, but an ordinary game on a Friday night, 100,000 people come. It's
Sorry. Is this football or soccer?
football.
Football, okay.
Is that what you're talking?
I was talking about soccer.
Oh,
So sorry.
well, that's actually, that's a much easier one.
Exactly.
Women's soccer is everything. Men's soccer is terrible. Who are anybody here name me an American male soccer player?
No.
Does anyone know Mia Hamm?
Yeah.
Come on, like, it's just not even like. They're pretty good. I mean, Canada is better in the women's game. Just saying. So, I do think but where I think that you and I agree is in this question of what equity might mean, which is a little bit different from equality, right? If equality means, and there's a little meme that goes around sometimes, and it's like equality everybody, there's a fence that's one size, right, and people are different heights, but everybody's looking over the same fence, as opposed to equity, which is what do you need in order for everybody to look over the fence? And that's where I think about safe spaces. Right? If people are being sexually assaulted, then provide the space where they're not going to be sexually assaulted and other things that are necessary for the people of a nation to thrive. I think that that's absolutely crucial. And speaking of safe spaces, I think that it is when you said that, I thought, did I say that? Did I say we had to have safe spaces for learning? But you're right, actually, I did certainly imply that. And I feel, one of the things that I often say is that learning at its best is a dangerous and unsettling venture. And I think that is still at play. If you create an environment where people can fail, because to fail is also to learn things, to try things out, to do things you haven't done before. And that, for me, is a really genuine form of educational engagement. It allows students to test and try what they haven't potentially tested and tried before, which is it's not inauthentic, but it is exploratory. And for me as a teacher, providing opportunities for exploration is really crucial to the entire educational endeavor, because I think that we know that we don't live in what's in the best of all possible worlds. There's always more work to be done. This whole conversation has been about that, hasn't it? And so the long-term prognosis, I think the long-term for me is well beyond the classroom, right? It's like, what kind of a world are we building? And for me, being able to provide relatively safe environments for people to explore, to test, and to try things out where they get feedback will actually produce better citizens. I really, truly believe that. Better citizens, and that's also what creates, I hope, a more equitable, just, and cohesive world.
Thank you very much. So maybe I can, this is the time for wrap up.
Yeah.
What I can wrap from our discussions for today, actually, whether you are a woman or a man, never actually fear on what is coming for your future. Just do your best. Just do whatever you can do, and then you can master your leadership on yourself. Learn more and be brave. I really like the slogan at UQ, own the unknown. I was quite confused. What does that mean? Being unknown is actually a good thing because it will push you to learn more and then get more knowledge. And the thing that I also want to, what I can digest from your session is actually we have to go far away sometimes to find the future for us. If I can quote one of the very popular Islamic scholars, classical Imam Shafi'i said, if you want mastering something, leave your hometown, go far away.
Canada,
Yeah.
Canada.
Leave your relatives, leave your colleagues. You'll get a new one, but you get a value, you get an experience, and of course, you will actually empowering yourself. So you have to go around. Before I close, maybe Pak Umam, you have to.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you very much, Professor Heather. Majela, finally I meet you. I'm very sorry, Pak Rektor and all can we start with Paramadina. So today I went here at 10 in the morning, but then I got a call from home. And just there's a situation, and then I went back there, and then just to make sure to the people that everything's still under control right now. It's just a fake construction. But anyway, today I'm very happy because Professor Heather already here, and even though I was not here, but finally I'm very lucky to have him one of the UK alumni, and I'm also part of the UK alumni, Professor Heather. We also part of the policies, political science and international studies. So some of the students here, Professor, they are taking the area study subject called Australia and South Pacific Studies. So today's a very, very great privilege to have you here. And the topic, women in leadership. So that's why in some cases, we also try to encourage the girls, especially in the class, hey, speak up, do something. Always, every single time. So that's why, hopefully, we really hope in the near future, maybe some of you could visit Brisbane, study there, not only Brisbane, but especially in the University of Queensland. I don't want to promote, but this is one of the best universities in Australia. This is not ordinary university. This is one of the best university in Australia. And of course, it's very rich university. If you need scholarship, there are some scholarship there, but we are in Indonesia. Indonesian government also provides so many scholarship every single year. So that's why you could apply if you want to continue your study, especially in Australia or maybe in Canada. Yeah, this part of the sponsorship. So University of Queensland will be one of the best option in Australia. And at the same time, Professor Heather, we are Para Madina Pak Rector already here. We could claim that we are small but giant university. In terms of the quantity, we quite small, but we were designed to be not as big as what we want, because we try to get into the more specific segment within our urban society. But we got kind of fundamental issue, fundamental values in terms of Islamicness, moderate Islam, and then Indonesianness and modernity. So that's why this issue could be very meaningful for us. Indonesian people are majority Muslim society. But in terms of the women leadership issue, we could be much more liberal, quote by quote, much more progressive, because in terms of theology, there are some doctrine that girls should be not as part of the leader. But in Indonesia, we are encouraged. We got quite extra space for girls, for everyone actually, to be part of the development roles in our country. So I would like to say thank you very much, and thank you for all staff for supporting this event. Hopefully, University of Queensland and Para Madina University could collaborate further. We have to speak much, discuss much with Mbak Nadia. Hopefully, finally I meet her again, and also Majela. Last time, Professor Majela visited here, but I was in Seoul for a summit, for a conference. So that's why, thank you very much, Majela, for making it.
Thank you as well on behalf of Professor Swicker. Thank you. This has just been overwhelming. I'm trying to count how many students are here today and taking the note of the wonderful questions that you asked Heather today. I mean, I think it was unexpected and just absolutely wonderful. And a special thanks to you. I know that your wife is expecting a baby. She didn't expect you to come, so thank you so much. And Raja, for your wonderful mediation today. That was really wonderful.
Yes,
and thank you, Rick.
People are really close to the station. Do you have a closing remark?
I feel like talk to them. Thank you all for coming.
Then we have picture, kenang-kenangan
So we
sini.
have the latest souvenir for you. Will be presented by Pak Rector.
Are the people still online or if they gone?
I think they still.
Let's stay seated then. Should I say, I should say? Sit in, seated.
Oh, boleh, Pak.
Yeah. Okay. I was thinking about online. Not that they would just have it.
Thank you very much. Para Madina, and we will. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Foto session nih.
Yeah, Braxton here.
And where picture?
So the next.
Maybe in the middle.
In the middle.
In the middle, yeah.
Standing di mana berdirinya bagus ya? Gimana kabarnya?
Lu juga.
Bos saya sorry banget. Ini tadi pulang siap nih.
You're in the middle. Yeah.
Dan berdiri.
Yang berdiri dong.
Oh, with the student. Berapa tadi yang di belakang? Berdiri nggak? Foto Pak.
Oh, foto ya.
Nggak terlihat. Kelihatan. Kayak berdiri aja. Satu, dua, tiga.
Kayaknya
Ya, ya.
Kayaknya ya.
Ya.
Mana jawab luar biasa.
Ya. Video, video.
Para Madinah.
Foto video. Foto dulu. Ada foto. Satu, dua. Terus video.
Ya, video ya. Pakai ya.
Ya.
Luar biasa.
Kasih kode. Kasih.
Madinah. Luar biasa. Para Madinah. Luar.
It's
Great. Thank you for the answer. Sorry. I had
Yang di mari kita
di Parekrang, taruh di ruang Parekrang nanti ya.
Lu gimana sih mau lewat?